Our first speaker this afternoon is Noor. She has a background in software engineering and data science, and currently works at Amazon Web Services. And now she is going to talk about the missing 78%.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me fine? Perfect. So, good day, everyone. I know that the session is being recorded, so if you're watching at a later time, good day, good morning, good evening, wherever in the world you're joining us from. Today's session is the scientific research on building communities in the age of AI. And it is a full circle moment for me because I started in 2024 with PyData Global. And as a reviewer, I was interested in seeing how many reviews were coming for sessions from women. And the number was extremely low. So I decided to see what was the number of women in data and AI. And that led me to a research. On that research journey, I spent about 3 months. I presented it at PyData Global. And then once I found the statistics, then I wanted to know what were the structural barriers, what were keeping women out. Why were there so few women? So you would know last year, Python took over JavaScript as the most used language on GitHub. Woohoo, we did it. Yet women are responsible only for 3% of open source commits. Our population on open source is way more than that. But there's something terribly wrong in there. So that led me on a study. And from that study, I found 24 groups on ground that were doing it right, such as the Grace Hopper celebration, where there are 10,000 technologists, women technologists, that are building their career, that are building pathways. This did not just teach me of bringing women into the pipeline, but what I learned is when we build for women, we also build for first-time people. We build for newcomers. We build for minorities. We build for people that are excluded. So in a sense, this taught me about building in the age of AI. What keeps our communities and what builds us together. So without further ado, let's get started on this. I am a senior program manager at Amazon Web Services. But my research, every time I do it and I find the number of missing women, it leads me to another thing. So one of the things that I do is I started the International Women Economic Council, which is a digital platform that connects women in management, leadership, and workforce roles. At this point, I've done 120 plus talks, but my TED Talk just trends highest. If you find the science or art behind it, please hit me up after the session. I also serve as the Vice President of Professional Development for the Society of Women Engineers here in the Pacific Northwest. So there's a lot for us to chat about. There is one disclaimer. Although I work for Amazon, but my research is my own, and views are my own today. So I want you to raise your hand if you've ever been in a room, if you've ever been in a workshop, in a conference, where you were really excited, but someone's conduct, someone's behavior made you feel unwelcome, made you feel like, you didn't belong, or you weren't able to work out your full potential. That is my story. And 20 years ago, in a class of 36 software engineers, I was the only woman. So this is pre-cloud era. We didn't have microservices. We didn't have LLMs. And C was the language that we were working with. Java was the new paradigm that was supposed to solve the problem. Well, it worked on my machine. I don't know why it's not working on yours. And that was a real thing back then. It wasn't really that the dog ate your homework. And when I went into that room, in addition to learning object-oriented programming, in addition to learning software engineering, I also learned wage gap. I also learned gender gap and imposter syndrome. Voices that whispered, "You do not belong." It was so hard being the only woman in the room. And I remember my first job was at Pakistan's largest conglomerate, where I had to work for a year without a female restroom. And there were no rooms which were gender neutral. So actually, 2 people had to guard the restroom while I used it. And I want you to take 10 seconds to think what that does to you, your identity, and your contributions. I'm happy to report that being an accidental trailblazer forced that company to have 3 restrooms and a lot more women in there. These were some of the structural barriers, but things got better. I got my MBA, and I landed at Amazon. There were far more women at entry level, women at mid-career level, and women even at vice president and senior management roles. And so, in the past 3.5 years, my mental model was, this is how the world looks. There is equality, there is parity. All of the problems that I faced were just my problems. But boy, I was wrong. Because this event at code.org, with our good friends monks, brought in 5 young, amazing computer science, young scientists. And if you've ever been in a room where you have been inspired by the next generation, their ideas, what they're building. So some of them were building LLMs to identify California fires before they spread. Others were working on healthcare. Still others were working on broken financial systems. And when we asked them, what kind of support do you need? What are your challenges? We thought they would say it's balancing Roblox with our work or being GPU poor. But what they said next gave us a punch in the gut, because they said there aren't enough women in leadership roles. I'm afraid when I will go to the workforce, I won't be paid fairly. They talked about that imposter syndrome. They talked about you do not belong. And then I knew that AI has a listening problem. But instead of talking about the listening problem, I'm going to show you the listening problem. So on the screen, there will be 10 images. If you know the image, don't identify it, but just raise your hand or nod. You know the image, okay? In 3, 2, 1. This is an amazing group. I'm sure you're going to crush it. Okay. Sorry. All right. Right. First, anyone? Second, third, fourth. Awesome. Fifth. All right. Anyone wants to take a shot at who the gentleman in the first image is? Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos. I'm losing hair. Can anyone help who that is? In the fourth, Zuckerberg. Okay. And the last one? Oh, wow. Yes, Jensen Huang, the Taylor Swift of developers, CEO of NVIDIA. Okay. So you're crushing it. And I'm going to show you the next 5 images. Okay? Ready? Who knows who the first image? Second? Anyone? Third? Fourth? Someone has to know the fifth one, please. Awesome. The woman in the first image is Meera Murati. She is the technical brain behind ChatGPT, former CTO of OpenAI, followed by the CEO of Canva. Of course, the third one is Sheryl Sandberg, the former COO of Facebook, Meta, followed by Fiji Sumo. She has joined OpenAI with a huge background in Facebook and Meta. And the last one, Ginny Rometty, from breaking the glass ceiling in the Big Blue, former CEO of IBM. Now, if I asked you to look at the data set, number one, and I asked you to double it, triple it, or make it 5 times its size, you would be able to identify all the images. But this is a Venn diagram of women that are making an impact in AI, women that are heavily documented, whose products you use on a daily basis, and the room is unable to identify them. So we know something is wrong with the picture. I'm making a bold claim here. I'm saying there are 100% of men in data and AI. Who agrees with me? Surely it can't be right, right? Women have to have some piece of the pie. Anyone wants to take a guess at what the number would be?
From your description, I think you said 22%.
Perfect, yes. Of all of data and AI roles, women are only 22%. And this is across the industry. So in Python, women are responsible only for 3% open source commits. This is what I call the missing 78%. We all know this is a structural problem. We all know something needs to be done about it. So what is it? And I took on an engineering approach. Identify the problem, collect some data, find out what's preventing us from building a pipeline that gets more women in. And then I saw, what if I have this research and I take it to the real world? Can we make an impact, all of us combined together? Once there was impact, and once we were able to move the needle, then I brought it to SciPy, where we got it as a paper. So this is my research, and it is 1.5 years of research that I'm going to summarize over the next 7 minutes. So this is going to be a roller coaster ride. What are the reasons? Why do we have so few women? It's a broken pipeline. Now, if I'm able to get my pen over here, so this is a 350% smaller pipeline. Let's see if I can get that. And this data comes to us from the World Economic Forum. So information communication technology is an umbrella term for all of our computer science, data, AI studies. And men are likely to graduate 8.2%, whereas 1.7% for females. When these women go into the workforce, there is a 21% gap. Again, the data comes to us from the World Economic Forum, I think. And this is for the US alone. The World Economic Forum studies 144 countries. So US is on the top quartile. Imagine what happens across other countries. The third, this data comes to us from IBM Insights. 51% of business leaders believe that there should be more women in decision making, but only 33% of the companies bring women to decision making tables, essentially leaving out 2/3 of the talent. And finally, this data is again from IBM. It's so small. If I inverted it and did it for our male counterparts, this should be in the 80s and 90s. But what I really want you to focus on is a senior manager role. This is where the pipeline begins. And women are only 20% of senior manager roles. How do we expect them to go to C-suite? How do we expect them to become CEOs? But their conversion is excellent because they beat women in S&P 500, where their participation is 5%. So women in technology are the best of the brand that we have. Now, if you do the integral of this, it is a very shocking and strange fact. By the time women reach mid-career, 50% of them elect to leave STEM because of the lack of support. Now, at this point, you would be thinking, this is a bunch of data. Great. Why should we care? Because McKinsey says if you have two projects, and project A has more women than project B, and project B is going to suffer from lack of innovation by 45%. And then Harvard Business Review puts a number on it that project A, that has more women, is going to be 21% more profitable. In fact, McKinsey also puts a number and says your bottom line is going to improve by 8.5%. So this is an economic case. And I could stand here and share other data points from my research, point after point after point. But it doesn't really matter, because as my good friend and president of the Global Women's Summit, Irene Nethevidat, says, we do not need yet another statistic to say women matter. We need to act on the data that we have to close the gender gap. Because at the current rate, it's going to take us 180 years. That's not in any of our lifetime. And here's a more human reason, because it's literally our health, our livelihoods, and our lives that are on the line. What do I mean by that? Let's take the case of medical research bias. There are so many examples, and I see you nodding your head, right? Yes, yes. And I'm taking that one. So in 2021, there is a company that developed an AI for detecting heart attacks. It worked really well, except for women. Its accuracy was 90%. Do you know why? Because it was trained predominantly on male data, missing critical signs that appear differently in women. There is 60% of bias in hiring tools. And for all the women in the room, TLDR, if you see a well-paying job, a fancy title, don't bother to apply. 60% of the time, you're not going to get it. Finally, for AI safety models that determine who goes to jail, who will be deported, they misclassify women and women of color 35%. And so that led me to see how we could reverse this. This is a snapshot of the 24 groups that we studied that were doing it right. And from studying these groups, I came up with a 5-step framework. So you saw that 350% gap early in the education talent pipeline. That's where we start from. And it brings me to Ada Developers Academy. Through their 11 months cohort that it's free of cost for the cohort to get software engineering. They have landed 80s across Amazon, Google, Microsoft, top-tier tech. Then employment. Even at my own company, Amazon, there is an employee resource group called Amazon Women at Amazon and Women at AWS. It is one of the 13 recognized employee resource groups. Then there's Salesforce that does salary reviews. So the wage gap, when you are equally qualified for an equal role, why should you get 21% less? Mentoring and community building is the third one. So I've just come back from Grace Hopper celebration that gets 10,000 women technologists in a room. They're buzzing with energy and ideas, and their career, life, and trajectory is changed forever. I'm not saying we're here because of males, but I'm definitely saying that we can't close the gender gap without the support of male allies. In fact, United Nations has a program, He for She, that has 1 billion people signing up for the program. And finally, we close the loop by policy making. So this was the research. But what if we applied the principles? Would it work in the real world? So for that, I had a prototype. And that was the Women in AI user group. I worked with friends at IBM, and we started the IBM Women in AI user group. So in the first 4 months, I was able to onboard about 4 women a month till we got to 14 women. Then we had this hockey stick growth. Overnight, we went from 14 to 40, which talked about the latent demand. But at this point, people are really curious. They want to know, why did people join our user group? What was it that we were doing right? How did we make the product sticky? And we don't have to guess. The number one reason people joined us was for mechanism. Lots of groups ask you, invite you, welcome you, but then leave you trailing behind. There is no regular programming. There is no regular meeting cadences. There is no sense of community. That is why people came to us, 79% of our members, 76% of our members, followed by community. Next, the biggest reason was 56% of them came to us for community. Of course, they wanted speaking opportunities, and some wanted travel and conference grants as well. And based on that, this is our roadmap. In the interest of time, I'm just going to skip it and take you to SciPy research. So I decided to study it in a research environment, and I put on my data scientist hat. My research questions were, how large is the gender gap in Python and related data science fields? Are there systematic barriers that keep women out? If so, what are they? And what actions can help us close the gap? The most important one, once we have all the data and information, what is it that you and I, together us as a community, we can do that will close the gap in our lifetime and not in 180 years? So this is a cross-section of the literature review that I did. I'm going to put up on the screen for the next 10 seconds, and I don't expect any of you to be an expert in this. But what I want you to notice is many of them start as single digits for welcoming women or for women's contribution. The best we do is almost at 25%, which means our participation is 50% in the workforce, and just half of us get the opportunity. Whereas there is economic evidence, there is a business case for having more women in the room. So, what are the factors? I talked about the pipeline issue, the leaky pipeline. Women don't get enough support. There is a 350% gap when we start out, right? Mentorship can easily reverse this gap. So the great thing is all of them have very quick and easy fixes. The second, third, and fourth were surprising. Gatekeeping. Nobody expected that if you were a woman author, if you were presenting a talk, or if you had a pull request, that would take 2x longer if your gender was identified as female. That's what data shows. For 72%, this should be 60%, the reviews are longer. Then, as the chair of the NumFOCUS Code of Conduct Working Group, the kind of requests that we get are not about physical harassment or sexual harassment. They're more about microaggressions. When someone looks at you and says, "Are you sure?" When we feel uncomfortable. When a woman voices her opinion and nobody listens, crickets. And 2 minutes later, a male might take her idea and say the exact same thing, and everybody nods. Yeah, that's it. So that is 72% women report bro culture and microaggressions. It's not the big things. It's the small tweaks that move the needle. And of course, United Nations tells us that it's not the same for men and women, because women are responsible for nest building activities. So the very young and the very old, they belong to women. And male counterparts just come to work and work. But women bring the nest building activities with them. So as organizations, so as people, as community builders, as engineers, as technologists, we keep these things in mind. And finally, there are algorithmic feedback loops that we saw. So what comes out of this? Anyone knows this woman? Awesome. Dr. Sally Ride, US's first woman astronaut in space. And she is the perfect brand ambassador for the WIM framework, which came out of 1.5 years of research and from the community that we built. Visibility, who is seen. Invitation, who feels welcome. And mechanism, what programmatic support exists. And at this point, you're thinking, awesome. So this is the refined framework, but what actions can we take? Actions come in 3 buckets: small, medium, and long-term. So the first set of actions is, if you're building a product, a community, any kind of service, you have onboarding toolkits. If you have any kind of code of conduct and you put in a single line that says, all views are welcome, or just say hi, or this is the first action you can take, then engagement goes up by 50%. As technologists, we love tracking indices, KPIs for everything, for new users, for adoption, for churn. Well, it's time we have indexes and KPIs for WIM, for inclusion. For how many people did we have that are of non-traditional background? How many women? How many users that are minorities? And then, technologists also love sprints. We love to see what we can pack in 5 days, in 2 weeks. What kind of beta products can we take out? Well, this is called a sprint, and what if we do an inclusion sprint? This really moves the needle. Now, I will move on to the midterm actions. So if you have 4 to 8 weeks, then consider mentoring, because this really reverses the cycle. My favorite program is Tech Women, which is a United States Department of Education program. and I've been a mentor, professional mentor in that program for the last 3 years. And they bring in 100+ women from 20+ countries and house them in Chicago and the Bay Area. And these are emerging women leaders. For 5 weeks, they connect with technologists. They get their mentoring, and they go back to their communities and make real lasting changes. One of my mentees this year used technology to become the voice of the deaf and to become the voice of the blind. She had all the technological information, but she got to know about the cloud and the large language models. And the next thing is events. If you see a panel on which there are 5 seats, please reserve one for a non-traditional candidate. The pushback I get is, what if they don't come? Data shows 90% of the time they will, 10% of the time it's worth the risk. And of course, shared learning. Platforms like PyData, PyData Global, SciPy, all of these other conferences that give us a venue to share ideas, to have these hard conversations, because everyone talks about LLMs and everyone talks about inferences and GPUs. But these are the conversations that we need to have. And finally, the long-term actions. This is where your community is established. I'm just going to ask you to focus on number 11, which is what we can all do as a community. You, me, us together. You might think this will not move the needle. But there is actually a scientific principle called the butterfly effect. It is said that an insect as small as a butterfly, by fluttering its wings in one continent, can cause a tornado in the other. And so, whatever you do today, please share these ideas in your own words. Share this presentation, host a sprint, or just have the conversation so we can all close the gap. Here is the QR code. This is where you will find the presentation. This is where you'll find the paper. And I'm looking forward to connecting with you. I don't want to thank you for your time and say open for questions, but really open for discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Hi. As a student, those numbers are very scary because my major is actually in data analytics. So what would you like advise to new grads before going in the workplace?
Wow. That's a big one. But some of the easiest questions, some of the easiest actions that you can take is never do it alone. Build in a community. Find a community of support. Find a sponsor. Find a member, a mentor. They will be your guiding light. Join communities. There is PyLadies here today. PyData, come to events. And anytime, last I was asked at SciPy, how do we convince the males in the room? And I say data works best with them. And economic data, even more so. So if you want to share some stats, that works. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Next question.
One of the things that I seem to have noticed, and I kind of get the sense that it was easier just 2 years ago, as little as 2 years ago, to be a woman in tech because a lot of companies have actually closed down, have effectively closed down their affinity groups, and comments from Mark Zuckerberg like, Meta needs more male energy. What is your advice to young women who are in the computer science pipeline right now, specifically at the early stages?
That is a very good question. And if you look at the state of things, to your point, in these 2 years, they seem to be going on a downward trend. But then there are spaces. I just came back from the Grace Hoppers, where there are 10,000 women technologists cramped in a room, literally having discussions, breakout sessions, main stages. The whole idea is you build with your community. One of the things that I'm doing as a next part of this is creating a repo where there is shared resources for everyone. And trying to do that by region, so hopefully that should help. But if you have any ideas and collaborations, please let me know. I would love to connect. Thank you.
Thank you for the talk. So you mentioned like lack of male mentorship as like one of the contributing factors. And I'm just wondering, like, what about female mentorship? Like, do you think that, women should be trying to mentor other women, or, what advice do you have for like mid-career women in tech, and how to help empower other more junior women in tech?
Yes, that's a great question. I think every time I go talk to a group or look at my presentation, I just end up taking one more role. And I'm a mom of twin daughters that are 10 years old. I think the responsibility is on each and every one of us. Sometimes we think, oh, I'm too early in my career to mentor. It's great to have male mentors, but sometimes what a female mentor can do for you, a male cannot, because they don't understand the barriers that we have. And if you're asking this question, please find someone to mentor, 2 or 3 people. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Hi, I just want to say thank you for your talk and for like making the impact that you do and sharing with us like all these things that you have talked about. I work in education, and one of the things that I want to do is like have my classroom be like a more equitable space, and try to give that kind of like visibility and mentorship to the young women in my classroom, but also helping the young men in my classroom also like learn how to become good allies, and also like, kind of guide them on a better path without like guilting them over like existing, I guess. But I was wondering, like, in your experience, what has been kind of the balance in co-ed spaces? How do you help uplift women and also make space for allyship and mentorship there?
Some of the things that have worked, do you recall a time when you ask a question and then for other people that had the same question but were unwilling to ask, say, oh, thank you for the question? So most of the times when we create spaces in education, males are just ready to join in. They just don't know what's the best way. So there is a 3-step. First is educating them, which is awareness. And the second is activism. And the third is advocacy. So whatever place on the spectrum you find, if there is no space in your classroom, then start with awareness creation. And then you can move on to activism, like just hosting a women-only book club or inviting male allies to those tables. And just by having that space, that room, males join, and the ripple effects are there. And what I've seen in practice is 90% of the time with all of the companies that I work with, the male leadership is very supportive, and even at mid-career level, they're supportive. We just have to start the conversation, and the onus is on us to start it. Thank you.